We're going to start with each, especially Mark, who's looking at me grumpy. Scary. Scary. So a couple of minutes. No, this Mark.
Yeah,
Couple.
he's always grumpy.
No. 1 or 2 minutes for each to share why they are here, the what, the when, and the how. So you have 1 or 2 minutes.
Wow. I'll keep mine very short because I just spoke and I feel like back-to-back panels is a lot. But I mean, obviously the Australian topic of the value chain is interesting to me. I mean, I obviously look at value chain from a technology innovation perspective. We spoke about it in the last panel, but I think there's significant need for, to reinvent supply chains and build localized supply chains, and particularly downstream into processing. We need new technology, so I'm passionate about that. And then the opportunity set for all countries really to develop a greater share of value add through new technology innovation.
So why are we here? Essentially, you're invited. Thought there was an opportunity. We have some American partners as well that are dealing with, some of the projects which we're involved in Africa with some of our Australian clients. I guess seduced by the topic of the conversation about collaboration, which is essentially our thesis, which is to try and bring together Australian and American interests for projects around the critical mineral space in Africa.
Hello. I moved to Sudbury in 2000 and went to work for Inco for about 4 years. And then I ended up joining a junior company in Sudbury called FNX Mining. And FNX had went and acquired 5 past producing non-core assets from Inco. And being a very entrepreneurial company, we're able to restart 3 of those operations, have some exploration success, and we grew into a $1.5 billion company on takeout in 2010, and FNX was one of the best performing stocks on the TSX, and it was a great experience for me. And being a very entrepreneurial person, I really recognized there was an opportunity in Sudbury for this type of a company. And Sudbury had been dominated by Inco and Falconbridge for over 100 years, very mature mining camp. So that was really interesting. After that, after we were acquired, I went on and did some other things. But by about 2015, I recognized that these assets that were so valuable within FNX were now within the hands of another major mining company. And again, we're non-core. And one mine had been shut down, another one, I could see the writing on the wall that it was going to close. And that's what really inspired me in 2016 to found Magna, to recreate that entrepreneurial junior company in Sudbury. And I was successful. I got it incorporated, made our first acquisition in 2017 of a non-core past producing mine. Took the company public on the TSX Venture in 2021. Made our second acquisition in 2022 of our Crean Hill mine, another past producing Inco mine. And in February 28th of this year, we acquired 8 properties from KGHM International. And these are the former FNX properties. So now we are a producing copper nickel PGM company with 1 producing mine and 4 fully permitted projects and over 50 million tons of high-grade copper nickel PGM ores.
And I will say I've been a reform lawyer for a long time, about 20 years in mining, so a lot of large cap, Barrick Gold, some of you will know, and I've kind of worked my way down the value chain, or market caps. Family office started what was First Cobalt, now Electra, about 7 years ago. And the mission, I guess our founding mission, is to onshore the critical mineral supply chain, starting with cobalt, but not ending with cobalt. And so we are well into construction of the continent's first battery-grade cobalt sulfate refinery. So that's all the batteries we use. And grateful for the support of the U.S. government. Even though this facility is located north of Toronto, outside of Sudbury, it has enjoyed the support of the DoD through a Defense Production Act grant, and that really speaks to the critical importance of what we're doing of onshoring infrastructure that's important for national security purposes. Now, it may be more exciting to this audience here is a startup that we're involved with. It's a joint venture. It's kind of our phase 2, but around recycling and circularity and localization. So we've got a number of cell plants that are being built. I would say the first 5-10 years of recycling in North America, we're learning. We've got it wrong. We're trying to boil the ocean. We're trying to control the minerals, and that's not the way the OEMs and the battery makers want this to evolve. So we've got an indigenous partner. We've got cell plants that are in their backyard, and we're working at it's a joint venture called ACCI, Battery Recycling, where we take the battery scrap, sole source from a single cell plant, bring in, we do the shredding, and recover the primary pieces. The black mass, the anode and cathode, it gets shredded into what we call a black mass, then finds its way up to the Electra refinery as a handoff, and then back into that supply chain. It's exciting because we're private, or at seed round, and we're breaking the mold on how things have been done thus far.
Excellent. Thank you, Trent. Mark, are you feeling better? So what do you look when you invest in critical minerals? How do you look at it in order to make a decision and to make an impact to go in the right direction to meet the demands of critical minerals?
It's a very broad question. I think there's a lot we consider. I mean, one we look for, and I'll frame it from the technology angle, but first we look for something that is really targeting a large market opportunity. This is a high-risk sector. It'll continue to be a high-risk sector. You compound that with technology risk, with team risk. We want something that can grow into comfortably $1 billion-plus company. We look for a team that is technically strong but still has commercial depth. We see a lot of really smart young technical founders that don't understand how to grow a business, particularly in this sector where your customers or your partners or the asset owners, as we've heard throughout yesterday and today, are often sleepy large companies which are innovating but slowly. We need someone who can penetrate those companies and has a B2B sales skill set. That's often overlooked, but we'll think about that. We want a business model, and we touched upon this in the last panel. There's no specific business model. You can be a SaaS-only provider, you can be a deep tech developer, but you need a business model that that is clear and can generate good returns on whatever capital is being invested into it. So, none of these things are unique to minerals, but I think the sector magnifies that.
Thank you. So focus on technologies. Andrew, you have... Australia has the penetration in Africa and the importance of critical minerals. So can you talk about new ways of collaboration with Australia and African countries?
Sure, and I think this is really core to the thesis that we've developed as a company. So we work on behalf of a lot of Australian and American clients. Essentially, 3 years ago, when we started a company with an American and Australian partner, initially we wanted to look bilaterally between Australia and Africa, whereas it became very clear that if you wanted to be active and make a contribution to the critical mineral supply chain, then the American component was going to be important. Australia is not diplomatically well represented on the continent. I think we have nine embassies, which is problematic, and also we don't have the depth of funds that are easily accessible from an Australian perspective. So collaboration from a commercial perspective makes a lot of sense, but I think what is emerging as well is what we would like to contribute to and encourage our clients to consider is a different form of collaboration with local communities, with local governments. I think we're now moving to a phase where we do understand the geostrategic imperative. There are commercial imperatives to also consider, but I think there are also there is a categorical imperative, to use a Hegelian phrase, about the engagement with the community that's going to be so critical to, one, creating a point of difference for these projects, but also having a deeper purpose when we're engaging with local governments and local communities. This hasn't always been well done, but I think from an Australian perspective, it's something where certainly we can collaborate with partners that are perhaps like-minded, create that point of difference, but also deepen that engagement on a more sincere level to ensure that once things are extracted, once the profits have been made, we're also leaving a legacy that's hopeful and very positive for the communities where these projects are situated.
Excellent, you're talking my language. Jason, how do you fit in the value chain and the Sudbury model, and how can it be replicated in Canada or elsewhere?
So our business model is very simple. We're right at the top of the supply chain. So we focus on the exploration, development of mines, and mining the ore. And then we sell our ore to either Vale or Glencore's processing plants in Sudbury. And this allows us to be very flexible and really focus on what we think we have great expertise in. And for an example, back in 2008, and I know most of you are probably too young to remember what 2008 was like, but it was a terrible time for nickel and copper prices with the financial crisis. And I was working with FNX Mining at that time, in the same mine that we're currently operating under Magna. And at that time, when nickel and copper prices dropped, we had some tough decisions to make. And I think that, in another situation where you had a large mill to fill, we probably would have had to either shut things down or we would have faced huge losses. But we were able to pivot. We were able to bring up our cutoff grade, send less tons to the mill, focus on precious metal-rich ores, and we were able to get through that tough time. And then when metal prices rebounded in 2009, we were able to ramp back up quite quickly. So that's where we fit in, and I think it's a bit unique in that we're very fortunate to be in a mining camp with so much geological endowment. There's still a tremendous amount of potential in the ground in Sudbury, and also to have all this infrastructure that allows us to move projects forward very quickly. And I think that it definitely is a model, and it was said here on an earlier panel, enhancing brownfield operations and finding ways to be more efficient and lower cutoff grades and be able to mine more of the resource that are in the ground, I think is really, really important to bolstering a very resilient critical mineral supply chain. And that's really what we're trying to do in Sudbury.
Thank you, Jess. Trent, how do you differentiate in the market compared to companies such as Redwood that already established in the recycling business?
Yeah, we're certainly less capitalized than a Redwood, I guess. Look, for us, we're not trying to control the materials. I mentioned boil the ocean. Recycling today, I had one of the biggest precursor manufacturers in China, met with him at the LME week a couple of years ago, and he took a napkin and he said, okay, like here's box one, where you take the battery and you do the pre-treatment, the shredding, and then you got the refinery, and then you got your precursor manufacturing, and then you get your cathode production, right? 4 steps. And he puts a circle around it and he says, don't you think that if this could be done, we'd be doing it in China already? And so in America, we're trying to take that big leap forward, right? To try to do it all. And for us, we're just trying to stick to our lane. So we don't need to own the batteries. We don't need to buy the batteries. We're partnering with our biggest client is LG, but we're partnering with the GMs and the LGs of the world. And we're taking it from a custody of supply or an export to China. A lot of our material gets shredded and shipped to China for final refining. So that doesn't help the onshoring of the critical mineral supply chain. So it's like the SaaS model of refining instead of software as a service, where the Microsoft 365, it's refining as a service. You partner with them, you get specific feed from a plant. A cell plant has 5 to 10% waste of raw material. So all that raw material is coming in that we fought so hard to onshore ends up on the factory floor at different levels of the production supply. So if we could take that, process it, and not try to play the commodity cycle. We don't need to hit the home runs, because guess what? In the 2008s, you're losing your shirt, you're going out of business. So create that recurring revenue model, build it on trust, build it on consistency, which refineries love. We hate the variability because it throws off your reagent consumptions, your recovery rates, and just don't be greedy. And it's being really, really well received.
The battery chemistries are changing all the time. So how will you respond to that?
Yeah,
How
look,
do you position yourself?
if you picture the 2 steps, right? The ACI JV, these are indigenous communities on whose lands we build our businesses, and they want to participate. The best way to bring them in is in the recycling. Extraction doesn't play well in all communities, and I understand that. They can secure the land, and then they can secure funding better than a pubco like Electra can. And so they do that piece, and you're building these units co-located or near located to the cell plants. So they are fit for purpose. And you've got a forecast. We're not buying heaps of black mass from different Honda and Tesla on a 1-year basis. We're setting up a long-term business model where we're tolling and we're bringing it back to them. So you know what you're getting. And so for Electra, when the handoff occurs to us and we take that black mass to recover the nickel, the lithium, the cobalt, manganese, and the graphite, you know what's coming. We've got a 1-2 year forecast, and we can set up our systems. Now, this is where AI and machine learning comes in. It's a KPI for my technical team because that's way over my skis. So if anybody can help us there, we got a lot to learn still. but it's about consistency. Plants like consistency, and if you start throwing in all kinds of mixes, if we're going to Best Buy and pulling stuff out of your garages, it's a really tough process, and recoveries will suffer.
Mark, how are we feeling?
Great.
So, testing the water. So now let's look in the past. You know, we are moving toward breaking down silos. In the past, you will just invest in exploration or mining or parts of the business, but now is the whole value chain and vertical integration. So how do you look to invest? Is the strength of the value chain impacts? How do you look at it to invest in a value chain? Or is that the trend?
I mean, as touched on, I think without doubt there's investments across the value chain. I mean, there are very few, but there are some. I mean, Cobalt's arguably one of them, sort of more vertically integrated companies that are looking to invest from, and I'm talking from a startup lens that starts in exploration and then looks to integrate. But increasingly we're seeing that trend. You know, there are companies like Cobalt and Fleet, actually spoke yesterday, that are operating at multiple points in the value chain. For us, we look at each segment of the value chain, try to see where we identify opportunities. Like being partway through in processing, you can have a very challenged business at times where you can get squeezed both on securing feedstock and then also what you do with your own product and selling it into a commodity market. That can be a challenging business. So you really need to have not just a differentiated technology, but have a business that occupies a part of the value chain where you can have long-term rents.
Thank you. Andrew, you also work with the US, Africa, Australia, and also we have to talk to China. We have to collaborate with China. So these are complicated collaborations. How do you see a new way to collaborate with China, with the US, with Africa and Australia? How does it look like?
Well, I would say that from our company's perspective, we have a particular focus. So we are looking to essentially triangulate between Australia, the United States, and partners in Africa. I'm not necessarily hawkish against China. It's an important part of our modern history. As from an Australian perspective, I've been there over 50 times. I wrote my thesis on Australia-China relations. But the reality is that I think the preservation of peace at the moment will be dependent on balances of power, which have preserved peace in Asia and our region for centuries at a time. And at the moment, there is an imbalance in critical mineral supply chains, which is dangerous. That's the contribution that we're working towards. And so we're looking to collaborate across those 3 points. That doesn't necessarily mean that we would, our narrative is based on an antithetical or antagonistic approach to China, but we do believe that that balance needs to be enhanced and restored, and we're playing a game of catch-up at the moment. This is also, I guess, leads and informs our engagement with local communities, because we think there is a point of difference in the way we engage with local governments and local communities that are also in the interest of those people where the projects are. So this is essentially what we're driving towards. It's nothing that's necessarily antagonistic, but creating a different vision to how things can work across countries where we perhaps have a similar vision and a similar intent, both in terms of that geostrategic balance, but as importantly in terms of the way in which we engage with local communities, local governments.
It's very difficult to have similar intent, similar vision, so how you deal with that?
Well, I mean, there is a tension. If you look at offtake or processing, every country wants processing in their own country. Australia is no different to America. We might articulate it in a different way. So it's a question of finding those supply chains, those balances that enhance the commerciality, I think, of what's we're looking to achieve, but also, is done in a way where there are different options and providing that optionality for the companies and for the partners with which we're working is also important. So there doesn't necessarily need to be one model. We have a range of clients, some America looking into Africa and then processing back in the United States, some Australian companies that would like to work more closely with American partners for a variety of reasons. So we're looking at an Australian mining operation and looking to process back in the United States. And also, we have to be very aware of the African governments and their needs and their desires to add to the value chain in country, and to the extent possible to be able to satisfy those needs. Because without that, firstly, it's harder to get the licenses, and secondly, we're not doing justice, I think, to that deeper purpose of a proper, full, sincere engagement with the local government.
Going a bit deeper on the impact on communities and prosperity in the region, Jason, would you like to elaborate a bit more on the impact of your company in the environment, communities, well-being, and then go ahead.
Sure. You know, in our industry, in the mining industry, there's three common challenges, I think, and this is, you know, basically globally, but and I'll speak specifically to Canada. And those are permitting takes too long, there's not enough access to capital, and there's not enough infrastructure already in place for these projects. And in Sudbury, for a number of reasons, we really don't have those problems. And this kind of speaks to the long history of Sudbury and you know, the infrastructure that's already in place, the community that's there that embraces mining. And that includes the local First Nations communities. There's 3 local First Nations that we engage and consult with for our projects in Sudbury, and they are all very pro-mining. They have built multiple businesses around supporting the mines. And when I meet with the chiefs, you know, one of the first things that's always asked is, when are you going to start construction on the next mine, the next project? When will those tender packages, you know, be awarded? And that's what they want. As well, the local government, as well as the provincial government and the federal government of Canada, have really shown a strong interest in critical minerals and the risk that the lack of critical minerals play in our economy. So there has been a lot of emphasis on that. With that, permitting has, you know, been improved. But, you know, for an example, in 2022, we acquired our Crean Hill project. It was a closed mine in a state of closure, but a past producer as recently as 2001. We were able to take that mine from a state of closure to fully permitted and even a 20,000-ton bulk sample in 18 months. And that is almost unheard of. So, you know, the reason we can do this is because we're on brownfield sites that are impacted. So our actual additional impact to the environment is extremely minimal. We're utilizing existing infrastructure. We don't have to build new tailings facilities. We don't have to build new smelters. We don't have to even build new water treatment plants. Those are already in place. So all of this results in, you know, very low environmental impact, very quick timelines, and time is money. And that helps us also attract capital. And because a lot of the infrastructure, both underground and on surface, is already in place, the capital cost to restart these mines is minimal for our industry. So we have a great relationship. We employ, you know, directly, indirectly over 200 people in the Sudbury region. That number is going to grow as we continue to start new projects. But it is I think it's a meaningful contributor to the local economy. And, you know, I'm really proud that we can be a part of that, and I live there, so.
Trent, do you want to add to that about Sudbury?
Yeah, I mean, localization is it's just the right thing to do from a proximity. You think of logistics cost, you think of ESG, you think of enriching the community where the activity is taking place. We don't need to do all this in China, right? There's a reason why we're pushing. There is geopolitics, there is ESG, but it's also the way we do business, right? Apple doesn't need to question the critical minerals that are in their phone. And with a North American company, you don't have to. You get the credibility, you get the traceability, you get the standards you expect. And let's be honest with ourselves, there are a number of countries overseas where you don't have that kind of reliability. And so where we sit in the midstream of the supply chain, this is not dependent on geology, right? This is very addressable as a priority for this continent to make sure we've got that critical minerals capacity. We've seen the bans on rare earths. We know what that means to the military. And so there is an overlay here that is political. But there's also a lot of sustainability, a lot of sort of benefits to doing things locally. Our Indigenous partner, it's an economic development agency called Three Fires. I mean, they are fired up, if I can use the pun. It's a great story of localization, and it keeps the control, and it allows for sort of a virtuous circle. In our case, within Ontario, but this is a replicable model that can happen all over America.
Maybe, do they have a few? Why is greed bad in this business? We will skip that. So maybe a question while I read these questions. If it's something the audience can do, live in the room or in the next few days or the next week to really reimagine the value chain and consider Australia and Canada, what would that be? Maybe each of you just very few words. What can they do in order to?
Yeah, in my case, look, we started as a pubco, and now our JV, we're deliberately keeping that private. Why? Because the capital markets aren't the right place for us. It's a different world than when I started my career many years ago. I think for this audience, and the reason I'm here, I think there's good opportunities for venture capital to come in, right? That early money to get these businesses off the ground. And I think the machine learning piece, like, we break rocks and we put stuff out the other end and we try to do it really well. One of the papers Jeff put up and one of the students presented was about machine learning on reagent selections and maximizing recoveries. That's right up our alley. And so I think for this audience, there are ways we can engage, particularly in the midstream, where perhaps we didn't engage before, and I'd love to start that dialogue and to try to bring the mining and processing community closer to the tech crowd, because I think there's a lot of things we can do better with the insights that frankly we don't have today.
Jason?
Yeah, I could reiterate a lot of the same things that Trent said, but I think one of the important things that's, if we really want to move things forward a lot quicker, there has to be a lot more partnerships and collaboration between Canada and the US. I know we've had a bit of a bumpy patch over the last few months, but hopefully we can get past that. And for the people in the audience, I guess one of the things I would ask of them is, make the trip to Sudbury, check out the universities there, the companies, the startups that are building the technology to make mines safer, to recover more metals from waste products from the mines, and to discover new deposits and collaborate with those companies. And I think that that'll go a long way.
I have a question for Andrew. What do you specifically do in Africa?
So specifically, we bring people together. So we work on behalf of clients and help problem solve for them if they're looking for a particular license or looking for an offtake solution or a funding solution, to be able to move a project forward. And increasingly, we're helping our clients in terms of their engagement with local communities.
And Mark, there's a question for us. What will it take to get lithium processing in Australia?
Kenan's laughing because he knows I know nothing about lithium processing. Look, I think lithium, we heard it yesterday from the Arrowhead team, lithium's a really hard market. You're sort of relying on producing more today in expectation of a future demand curve which hasn't delivered yet. So much of the processing is dominated out of China. Australia has a wonderful lithium endowment in hard rock lithium. Most of that is shipped offshore under long-term contracts. I think you're seeing from the Australian government, not just in lithium, but across battery minerals, new initiatives like our National Reconstruction Fund, which is a $15 billion fund and has money earmarked to develop that downstream industry. I think with that, you'll start to see capital come in to build localised plants. I think it takes a lot for someone to take risk, compete against China and invest in capital into something that's a multi-year, multi-decade facility when there's already existing infrastructure that's serving the existing market demand. So I think we need to probably see more, a longer uptick in prices in combination with utilising some of the now available non-dilutive funding is probably what I would say.
Thank you. There's a question that's a bit controversial, I think it's for Trent. Yesterday we heard recycling will not be important in the next 15 years. Do you agree?
I think there have been 36 manufacturing cell plants, battery cell plants that have been announced over the last 3-4 years. They're not all going to get built, but 5 to 10% scrap rate. Let's assume a third of them get built. And I apologize, I don't have the gigawatt capacity at my fingertips. But that's a lot of scrap and it's got to go somewhere. Right now, what we are doing here in America is we're shredding those batteries, and a lot of that goes to Asia. A lot of that's going to China, even though it's not supposed to. It'll stop along the way. Some of it goes to Korea. Glencore does take some in their smelter, not the optimal recovery process, but the hydromet processing, the clean chemical process that allows you to leach 99.3% and extract what you can thereafter of the products. We're not doing that yet. And so all that manufacturing scrap, we can't let it go to the heap piles. We can't let it go to Asia. We've got to find the solutions here. And you can grow with that market.
Thank you. How many more feel sort of connected to Sudbury? You raise your hands, please. Less people than before. Guys, what did we do here? So I want to thank you very much. I think we have 1 minute left, so which is great. Thanks, Mark, Andrew, Jason, and